carried. Move on to the next item, and Councillor Fletcher, in regards to your request, we're just waiting on one of the staff members to be here before we even consider going into confidential for the Three Kings item. So we're just waiting for that. So we'll move into the investigation of the Central Library. Councillor Casey and Councillor Coombe, are you okay to move in second in regard to this item? So it's been put on. Yes, I mean, I just wanted to get that so I can put it on, and then I can get a discussion done.
Yes, I just had a little error that needs to be fixed. The proper name of the library needs to be included.
Yep.
In A.
Yep. So I just needed to see if you were okay to second. And
I'd like to second it with the name of the library included.
Okay, so then, so it's on the table for discussion. So, Paul and Corollas, or yours, and Muller. Kia ora.
Okay, very quick introduction. We've done an investigation in terms of the Central Library. The proposal here is that we move to the next stage, which is an indicative business case. Funding is allocated for that purpose. Happy to answer any questions.
So, Merla, I just wanted to look at what's the official name that Pippa was, Councillor Coombe was referring to, so that can be changed.
Are you referring to Pātaka Kōrero? Tāmaki Makaurau? Kōrero, yeah. Sure.
That's all right, it's long,
Sure.
and then it's on the table. So, there's any questions, comments? Because I'll take both. If not, Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just a couple of questions on this indicative business case from someone of outside the central city. So, as far as its role as a regional destination facility, is that its current classification?
It's currently, through the chair, it's currently classified as a regional/local facility in the community network facility plan.
Okay, so if it was to have this regional destination facility, what that lifts it up a bit from that combination that currently exists?
Through the chair, the intent is that there's more emphasis on the central services rather than local. At the moment, the services are very much local in nature. So what the business case is looking at is more realignment towards being more of a destination than service the local residents, although the local residents are obviously a core market.
All right, that just surprised me, Mr. Chair, because I know that the Central Library is used from people all over Auckland, particularly students that come over. Just in terms of one of the other aspects of this business case is, exploring a potentially alternative location. I think I saw that somewhere in there. Was that correct? Yes?
Through the chair, that is one of the options.
Okay. So, that's going to come out in the wash, but I'm just kind of curious to know what other locations exist that would exceed the one that currently exists in Auckland. Do we have some indicative research as to where that would be in Auckland's city centre?
So through the chair, we don't have a specific site in mind, but as you'd appreciate, the city centre is going through quite a lot of redevelopment, and that creates opportunities for us to partner with potentially commercial developers as well and look for other sites.
Councillor Walker, Fletcher, and then Henderson.
Sure. I just note that we've got funding allocated for the indicative business case, but in respect of the funding for the project itself, have we projectised this for development contributions so that we're actually getting money from, in this instance, the wider Auckland catchment, but particularly the centre city area where there is a massive increase forecast in population and obviously concurrent development contributions?
So through the chair, it's the same situation as the previous item. So that Local Government Community Wellbeing Amendment Act 2019 entered into force on 14th of May of last year. And I think normal process for council is that we update our contributions policy in tandem with the long-term plan. That was the process last year.
So just in that respect, are we crunching the numbers on this? I mean, we can pretty much guess at what the costs of the library are so that we can incorporate in the development contributions that we're going to be going out with next year. And we're working on those now.
So through the chair, we do have some financial models that start calculating those, but of course, because the Central Library has a range of different functions in terms of regional as well as local, then we have to apportion that impact, and that impact has to be growth driven. So it does get reasonably complicated quickly.
Is that a yes then? We are, okay, that's great.
What an interesting report. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed reading this. Going back a number of years now, when Study Auckland was launched, that brought so many international students into the Auckland area, the library was used very much as part of the attractiveness of Auckland. Could you speak a little further? The report doesn't go into that specifically, but you know, we're in the COVID world at the moment and we're not seeing as many students, but if we ever emerge again in a post-COVID world, what might we anticipate from the needs of that student community? And a question posed to me by the councillor Newman on my left here is, well, why isn't the university library dealing to that? I haven't had too much time to explain to him some of the difficulties in and around that, but I just would be really interested because a lot of the economic vitality of Auckland came about because of those students and the role that you have played in the past. So just some commentary on that would be helpful.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Fletcher. You're absolutely right, and COVID has hit the CBD and including the Central City Library quite significantly. The international students, whether they visit, whether they're enrolled in private providers or AUT or the Auckland University, do use our library for a range of reasons. Sometimes it can be actually that their apartments are very small, so it's a locality issue that it's closer for them to go. Auckland, both of the universities have good facilities, but there's a lot of students. When Auckland is full of students, there are a lot of students in the city. And so they're a big customer base for us in a non-COVID environment.
Can you translate that to numbers? You know, at the sort of peak, can you give us an idea of what kinds of numbers of students that you might expect to see?
Of just students? Have we got that in the report?
Have you got a breakdown on that?
Okay, I haven't got it with, I haven't got it with me. Yeah.
And through the chair, so just prior to COVID, we were doing quite a lot of intensive research with users of the library, and that was the biggest impact on that piece of research, is that we didn't actually have the students to be able to get a sense in terms of their proportion. So as we do that indicative business case, it will be important to fill that gap of information that's missing, because certainly we do have good previous data and a good sense of what the users look like, but we don't have a sense of their experiences and what they're specifically using it for and for how long, and that's quite important. But we also get a sense that I guess part of the attraction of the Central Library is also that there are a number of books and resources that are available in a whole range of languages, which are, that's probably one of the key features of that library. So people will be coming and reading those materials in addition to just studying as well.
Have Councillor Henderson, then Darby, His Worship the Mayor, Councillor Coombe, and then Councillor Walker, and the rest of Tāmiki Makaurau. So,
Thanks, Chair. I'll try and be quick. I'll make a short comment before I ask. I've got a couple of questions, but I need to point out that in the context of these questions, I really, really support what you're doing. I think that a central city library is extremely important to any modern city. I visited the Central Library in Mumbai, and that was beautiful. That was a tourist attraction in its own right. And that's the sort of vision that we should be looking at for Auckland, is something that people will say, look, that's a public facility, but we've travelled here for it. It's amazing. And that's all we need to do. But I've got a couple of questions on it. Te Manawa was a hugely successful multi-purpose destination facility. Is that what you're looking at for the Central Library, that kind of model?
Well, certainly, if you look at new developments around the world, that is the model that's increasingly important, and our community facilities network plan suggests that. However, there are some elements of Auckland's Central Library which is different from Te Manawa, for example, including the extraordinary heritage collections that are looked after in that building, and the city archives. So those are services that are in that building which are unique to New Zealand and the world. Yeah.
Good. So I didn't catch this in the report, but what are the numbers and users trending year on year for this facility at the moment?
Through the chair. The numbers are declining. Over the last 5 years, the number of visitors have dropped by 7%. What's interesting is that across the network, the decline is much more visual, much stronger. And that just shows that the visitors to the Central Library are still attracted to the facility. Also, a bit of a caveat is that we are tracking people who use a library card, and there are a lot of users, especially in the Central Library, who come as casual visitors, and they may not have a library card or may not use their library card, so it's a little bit harder to get a good understanding of who they are and where they come from.
That's fascinating, that answer, because it sort of leads me to think we had discussions about venue numbers before, and maybe those venue numbers declining aren't as accurate and written in stone as we might have thought. And actually things aren't declining as much as we might have thought. Is that true? And sorry, I've got one more question after this.
So through the chair, we have had declining numbers face-to-face and increasing numbers in electronic. So we do track door count as well. So we're looking at both figures together. One of the other things that has happened in with the Central Library that has impacted has been the non-development of the St James Theatre. So there's been hoardings right up against the Central Library building for a good couple of years. We've also had scaffolding around the building for a year. So there's been multiple impacts on the Central Library visitation.
Thanks. One last question. Thank you so much, Aroha mai. It's been a bit of an all-the-rage discussion on selling and leasing, and this was actually tried in Takanini. I would not support this at all. Let's make this clear. But why are we not looking at that model in the central city? Why is it okay for Takanini and not here?
So the chair, so at the moment we are just really looking at high-level options, as you can see in the report. Whether it's a lease or own model would be looked into a commercial case, so that's much later in the development of the options, not only in the detailed business case, really.
Councillor Darby.
Thanks, Chair. Merla, I have to say I'm not partial to going with the Auckland Central Library. For me, I just feel like it's not an attractive building. And when you get in it, you can't see the light. There's no relationship to the outside. It feels like a mausoleum. And that's no criticism of you as the manager of our libraries. It's what you've inherited. So just in the coursework that you've done, have you ever polled or surveyed, users on how they actually feel in the building and what they say? not about the book experience or the learning experience or whatever they can do there, about just being in this structure.
Thanks for the question. So the chair, so we have received a lot of feedback about how people who use the library feel, where they sit, the noise level being an issue, the fact that different activities take place together, not so much about the light or the actual building itself, but there's certainly been negative feedback. What I thought was interesting in terms of the attractiveness of the Central Library as a facility is when you compare the number of visitors or visits per inhabitants between Auckland and Christchurch and other libraries, we're relatively low. So that suggests that there is opportunities to make the library much more attractive through architecture, also through services, to a much larger and wider range of people.
Through the chair, and just in response, I mean, you're right, those are some of our challenges. The building was designed in the 60s, first part built in the 70s, second part built in the 80s. You know, people have different expectations of a public facility now. So we did a very, very cheap and cheerful renovation. So if you haven't been in the last couple of years, you might notice slight difference in the light. So we have improved the lighting in there. But your point's well made. Thank you.
Your Worship.
Thank you very much, and it's an interesting report. You have to keep the status quo in, but if the status quo is that while the city's growing, the population visiting the library is going down, you know that it's not fit for purpose. My first question is, in terms of a broader purpose such as Te Manawa, and, you know, a very attractive surrounding to be in, are you seeing, I mean, how is a facility like that dealing with numbers coming in, given the fact that there's a greater use of digital? Because I'm just wondering, in 10 years' time, is digital going to be so prevalent that actually you don't need to have a library in the most expensive part of the city because you can work digitally from anywhere? So I'm just wondering, if I reframe that question a little bit, how is digital going to affect the overall impact of or place of libraries, say in 10 or 20 years' time? And will making it a broader facility such as Te Manawa reverse the trend of visitation?
Yeah, Your Worship, Mayor, I think that your points are very valid. I think that we are in a very changing world, and then we've got COVID on top of it. So I think that's the point of doing this investigation, is we do have a building which is not fit for purpose, but we're going to have to traverse a range of options. Our digital issues, for example, now are just over 22% of all our issues. So that's gone up. You know, but we're one of the highest issuers of digital material in the world in terms of library systems. So there are a number of different factors at play, and this is what this business case will start to explore, is the nature of a central library now, yeah. But Christchurch has seen significantly increased numbers with their new building.
Yeah, and the fact that we're doing much less well than Wellington or Christchurch says something that we have to change the nature of what we're doing and how we're doing it. My other questions, I mean, if you look at your last two options, a new building on the site or a new building elsewhere in the city, if your digital thing is projected to increase more and more, you probably wouldn't stay where you were. But if you did stay where you were, you'd maybe be looking at a joint venture using the airspace above the library and the community centre, or however you might evolve it. What's the value of the land that the library is on at the moment, and do you have any sense of the what you'd get towards the cost of a major reshaping, rebuilding, if you were to sell the airspace above for residential, commercial, or whatever else it might be used for?
Thank you for the question. So the land was valued in 2018 by Becca at $27.5 million. and the building was valued at $40 million. As for the potential for development, it's not my area of expertise, so I can't really answer that.
But through the indicative business case, that's something that we can explore and get some better data and bring it back to the committee.
Yeah, because, I mean, nobody needs to be reminded around here. We've just been looking at a swimming pool for $53 million, and we're on a very tight budget. So obviously, if we could make this library into a much better purpose-built facility, but get an extensive contribution towards the cost of that from selling higher floors in the building or leasing or whatever you decide to do, that's obviously a more attractive proposition in terms of being able to afford to do this and earlier rather than later.
And just to add to that, there are some very good examples in Chicago where that has happened very recently.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good paper and we should pass it.
Councillor Walker, Coombe, and then Councillor Casey to close.
Well, I've just got a question around the civic nature of the library and if you like, the financing and the funding. If we look at the history of libraries in Auckland and New Zealand for that matter, and also internationally, but more particularly Auckland, the role of benefactors has been hugely significant, both in respect of the library itself and its collections. The same is true of the art gallery, which was the library. So in a circumstance where cities are remarkable entities, they exist in perpetual succession. Civic pride as it goes to art galleries, squares, libraries, are part of that integral civic function that often we seem to just forget. Is there not a case for seeking philanthropic support for the library? If you do something and you do it well and it's visionary and it's moving forward, and I would suggest that libraries will always be around in some way, shape or form, can't we do something really good? And can we factor that into the business case? And can that be done collaboratively, so it's not just something that's occurring within these walls, but something that we're going out to Auckland for, as we went out to fund this building, which was done on the basis of civic subscription, and so many other facilities like the museum up there on the hill. So I just tossed that in. Are we actively looking at that?
So the chair, thanks for the question. That's a really good point. And you're right in saying that if you have something which is visionary, which has mana, then you're more likely to attract corporate and other funding. The funding sources is something we look at the detailed business case. So there's a couple of steps from now, but we will definitely be looking at potential funding.
Councillor Coombe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the report. I have just a couple of questions. The first one is in relation to, it's quite a complicated governance structure for the library. This investigation is not actually going to be looking into that or making recommendations around the governance. So I see the local board resolved on confirming that they want to retain their local library. Is that's sort of off the table in terms of this process?
So through the chair, that's not part of the indicative business case.
Does it need to be looked at, or is it just kind of the status quo is just we're going to run with that?
So through the chair, then I guess that would be a separate issue and would require some options to be developed, and we'd have to just look at it in terms of the context of the allocated decision making within the Auckland Council Act, which has 3 different criteria in terms of how you look at how assets are allocated in terms of their decision making.
Yeah.
And there could be some options where you might have some co-governance as well, and we have some examples where that applies, such as in the domain. So, you know, that's probably a standalone piece of work.
Thank you. And then just a second question around the recognising the role that the library has for city centre residents and the 43,000 people who live in the city centre, and I know there's real fondness for the library as a very crucial venue and serving all sorts of needs for the city centre residents, including homeless. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing that to be incorporated. The question I had is just in terms of the way B is worded, it talks about that agree the future role of the Central Library could be those elements, but in the report it's got the statement on paragraph 43 where it talks about the proposal for the Central Library of the future is as follows, and I just wondered, is that clear enough to be able to, that you're going to revise that statement that is the foundation for the business case? It's just a curious use of could be when the report's talking about this is what you want to take forward as the future. So I just want to make sure we're all land on that. That's clear enough direction for what you're going to take forward and how you're going to incorporate the new 4 into that.
Thanks for the question, through the chair. So it was never intended in the future role of the Central Library that the library would not serve local residents. So maybe it was more the fact that we were emphasizing the fact that it's a destination and serve a wider catchment. But local residents are obviously part of that catchment. So we could make it much more obvious that the Central Library also retains a local library role, if that's...
Probably not being clear enough. I'm trying to think of my grammar terminology. I need you, Councillor Cooper, you're good on these things. Where it talks about could be, that's more aspirational. That's not saying it is, whereas the report says these things are what is the vision. So is that clear enough for you to be able to update what's in paragraph 43?
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I don't need to make any further comment other than it absolutely has my support for this work to progress. So thank you.
Okay. Councillor Casey's close.
I just need to twiddle with it. There is a wee mistake in the B. We've got Central Library twice. We've got Central Library could be a fit for purpose Central Library. So we need to take the second Central Library in number 4 out. A fit for purpose facility it should be if you want to be really pedantic. But in closing, I think you've heard today that what you have here is support from this committee. I think that the councillors and the mayor love our Central City Library. And if you've had a good read of the report, I would love a destination library that's equal to any of those that you've got in Geelong or Helsinki or the Netherlands. And more so though, after being at the South Atrium the other night, what's missing at the Central Library is a big event space. I care less about how it looks from the outside, Chris. I care more about what happens when people go inside the door. Oh, right, good. Inside the door is awful as well as the outside. Oh, well, we're doing the right thing and fixing it. Yep. The South Atrium, that was just a joyous thing the other night. The idea of the public being able to access that space, and that's what we haven't got. You can cope with 200 or 300, 300 max, but that means you're missing out on a whole range of things that can bring more people back into the library to discover it, not even back into it for the first time, to discover the wonders therein. And so I think the idea of a destination library is what we haven't had, and that will incorporate, you know, the local people's needs, the needs of the homeless community, because the library's always put that first. So I just see it as a wonderful. This is the joy for the next how many years? When are we going to get it? That's my question. When are we going to get it? What's the timeline on this, Mr. Chairman?
As soon as we can.
After the polling, we still can.
So look, the debate has been closed. So I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Look, I'm going to move a precedent. in regards to the agenda items. I know that Paul needs to go at 2:30 as well in regards to his family. But Councillor Fletcher asked as if the confidential